Talking about these spy novels, these thriller novels, the James Bond genre, right, and the Tom Clancy thing.
Oh, yeah, sure.
What was his iconic character that Alec Baldwin played in Hunt for Red October, and then Harrison Ford played it in Patriot Games? Do you remember that guy, that character's name? They all come up with these iconic characters, right? Brad Thor, our buddy Brad Thor, who, by the way, is going to be our guest in studio here Thursday with his new book. He's got Scott Harvath, former Navy SEAL, is his character, and it's just there's something about those books that to me always makes summer. Do you these days? Do you sit down with a book and read it over the course of the summer? Do you do that?
No, I read all the time.
Right, but you're reading nonfiction news.
I know, and I very seldom. I read so much all the time that for me the break is not reading.
What do you use for your escape, especially in the summertime? Do you have a guilty pleasure? Do you do the romance novels? Do you do historic novels? Do you do spy thrillers? Give us a call, 888-630-9625. It's summertime now that it's officially Independence Day. We want to know what book you're taking to the beach and what you would recommend other people to do. 888-630 WMAL.
Jack Ryan.
I
couldn't remember it. I don't know why.
Right. I couldn't either off the top of my head. It's funny. I started watching Patriot Games. I've never seen Patriot Games.
Oh, that's great.
I know. I can't believe I've never seen that one. I saw the second one, which was crud, with the drug agents, the Clear and Present Danger. I've seen that one when Harrison Ford played the part. Anyway, I do. I love these kind of books because it's pure escapism, and the way these authors interweave their characters into real life events in many ways, especially some of the good ones. Tom Clancy was great at that, right? He was able to write these books in such a way that it utilized headlines that are happening right now that affect, what we're worried about in terms of this, of international intrigue and national security. But then also, oftentimes, they're ahead of the game. Mm-hmm. You remember Tom Clancy wrote that book about a jetliner being used as a terrorist weapon into the Capitol building, and that was 10 years before 9/11.
Right.
It's remarkable.
Yeah, my favorite Clancy book, by the way, is Hunt for Red October.
Oh, yeah, well, it's great.
It's really interesting because I got to be on the USS Alabama one time.
Oh.
The nuclear sub.
Uh-huh.
I even had the same hat and all that kind of stuff.
Although that was the sub from Crimson Tide,
That's right. Oh, you're right. I got them mixed up. I got my sub movies mixed up.
No, but that's a great movie, too, as well. But the book, Hunt for Red October, is even supposed to be better than the film. The best thing about Hunt for Red October, of course, Sean Cassidy as a Scottish Russian. Sean Connery. Did I say Sean Cassidy?
Sean Cassidy.
Good morning, everybody.
That would be good.
Now that would have been something.
Partridge Family on a sub. Now that would have been a movie I would have watched.
Someone may pitch that, so we should be careful.
A hippie-colored sub,
well,
like the bus.
Daniel Silva's book is called The English Spy. It's just released now, and his central character, the Jack Ryan type or the Scott Harvath type, is a art historian. This is what's so great about these books. He's a international spy and assassin. Mm-hmm. And art historian who actually he restores great works of art like Rembrandt and stuff. Yeah. And joins us now. The author Daniel Silva joins us. We were just talking about what an incredible invention Gabriel Allon is. That he is this assassin and spy, Daniel Silva, but also is an incredibly erudite and well-versed art historian and restorer. He actually takes a painting and brings it back to life. Well, where did you come up with that?
I was literally walking down the street one day in Georgetown. I was going through a sort of a classic character building exercise with the character when I was constructing him for the first time. And my wife reminded me that we had dinner that evening with a friend of ours named David Bull. And I stopped in my tracks and I said, oh my God, that's it. Gabriel is an art restorer. Now, who is David Bull? David Bull truly is one of the world's finest art restorers. At that time, he was working at the National Gallery of Art in Washington. And I had dinner with him that night, and I pulled him aside. And I said, listen, David, I have this crazy idea. I want to take an Israeli assassin and turn him into an Italian art restorer. Can you help me? And he said, of course we can do that. And I spent a lot of time in the lab at the National Gallery on the Mall, and mornings on the Mall, and the more I learned about the craft of restoration and how these people go about taking a 400-year-old painting that's been through the ringer and bring it back to life, the more that I found that it had a lot of things in common with assassination. I know that might be fine. Guys with paintbrushes and magnifying
glass.
Well,
but you have to be detailed-oriented, that's for sure.
And so I wrote the book, and it was, the funny thing is that Gabriel was never ever supposed to be a continuing character. He was supposed to appear in one book and one book only, and now here he is 15 books later.
Let me ask you, though, you said you were walking through the streets of Georgetown.
I was.
You were working on character development. How does that work? What were you absorbing as you walked through the streets of Georgetown that ended up in your books?
Look, I mean, anyone who lives in Washington, as we do, I'm not a full-time resident there any longer, but look, it's a wonderful place to write about people in power and intrigue and people under pressure, and I've always found Georgetown to be a really inspiring place. I like to walk through the streets there, walk down to Bowie Mongers, get my coffee in the morning, and think about that John F. Kennedy lived in this house. During the Cold War, great CIA figures lived in the neighborhood and were plotting against the Russians. So I've always found a lot of inspiration on the streets.
That is the case, isn't it? Back in the heyday of the intelligence agency's creations post World War II, during the advent of the Cold War, a lot of the first spies were blue bloods out of Yale and Harvard who all lived in Georgetown, right?
Yeah, they lived in Georgetown. They drank a lot of martinis, and they did a lot of their work in the salons of Georgetown, and it was, I sort of draw upon that and think about that when I'm doing my work. It definitely helps. The new novel is called The English Spy, and I want to ask you about how you incorporate the paintings into your novels. I've read a couple of them, and it's always interesting that the painting that Gabriel Allon is working on, sometimes it's more obvious than others, but there is some subtext into the content of the painting and the mission or intrigue that he's involved in. Do you pick the painting first, or do you pick the plot of the story and then find a painting that fits that? I pick the painting first. Oh. And a lot of that is just sheer fun. Like, what do you feel like working on? And sometimes I pick it alone, and sometimes David and I will choose one together. But that's the wonderful thing about Renaissance painting in particular, or Caravaggio, which Gabriel has worked on a great deal, is that there's a lot of violent imagery in it, and he's a man of violence who stands in front of these magnificent canvases, and I'm able to create allegorical connections from what's going on in the painting to what's going on in the story. Right. It's wonderful.
We had Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer on, a guy who was actually trained by the CIA, so he actually knows what he talks about. And we were asking about, do we have enough intelligence resources around the world now to give us good, detailed information that we need? As a person who writes about this craft, and I'm sure you have people in the craft who you consult with, what's your opinion about that?
I'm interested. What was his take on it?
Not enough.
Not enough. And so I worry. Look, I mean, we need really good intelligence right now about what Vladimir Putin is up to in Eastern Europe. We really do. I think that a primary function of an intelligence service is the avoidance of conflict. Right? You want to know what your adversaries are up to, and to try to keep you out of trouble. And we are in a situation with the Russians in Europe where we seem to be inching toward, and I'm going to say this very carefully, but the possibility that at some point in the near future we might be in an armed conflict with them. And I don't say that lightly. Look, we put a bunch of military equipment in Eastern Europe a couple of weeks ago. The Russians are building up there. And so I hope that we have enough resources dedicated to Russia right now in classic intelligence gathering, as opposed to our counterterrorism mission, which is obviously global and immense, and has taken up a lot of the attention of our intelligence services for more than a decade now. Daniel Silva, we got to leave it there. It's always good to talk to you. That's really interesting stuff. And the book is called The English Spy. By the way, he used to be the executive producer of Crossfire back in the good old days when it was really good. So maybe a political pundit assassin will be one of the series, or a talk show,
or a radio show, talk show host who does.
Thank you, Daniel Silva.